Quote PC Gamer magazine, "Give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man to play Doom and you'll never get another day's work out of him." Doom was a gaming phenomenon in the 1990s. It was installed on more computers than Windows 95, with the book Masters of Doom estimating the number of downloads at 15 million. The game has been called the father of first-person shooters due to increasing the popularity of the genre and spawning many games that took heavy inspiration from it. That being said, we, the Academy, do not automatically award games for being popular. After all, so far at least, Mario and Sonic have had fairly minimal presence at the Oscarinas, despite being beloved by many. But for Doom, we believe this is a case where there is substantial merit in the wisdom of the crowd. Doom has taken a total of 8 nominations, the most of the season, and in this video, we will give our reasons on why it deserves so many nominations and why it may deserve some awards as well. I am Corbett Capon, the mini chairman of the Oscarinas, and the host for today's nomination coverage. Joining me tonight is my guest, Noah. Noah, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Corbett. Thanks for inviting me on. I feel honored to be talking about Doom right now.
Excellent. So, before we dive into our Oscarina nomination breakdown, I'll give a summary overview of Doom for those who are unfamiliar. In Doom, you play as a space marine, unofficially named Doom Guy by fans. He was placed on guard duty on Mars when scientists accidentally opened a portal to Hell. Doom Guy must fight through the demons in order to avenge his fallen comrades and return to the safety of Earth. Doom was released in 1993 for MS-DOS, which is the version we will be analyzing. This version of Doom included only the first 3 episodes of Doom. Episode 4, Thy Flesh Consumed, was added in 1995 as part of the release of The Ultimate Doom. But we don't like episode 4 of Doom as much, so we will only be analyzing the first original 3 episodes that released in 1993. Doom was developed and published by id Software. The head programmer, John Carmack, would later go on to be the chief technical officer of Oculus Rift. One of the head level designers, John Romero, would later go on to form the company Ion Storm, which would develop the first Deus Ex game. Doom has a total of 8 nominations. It is nominated for Best Interface, Best Sound Atmosphere, Best Technical Artistry, Best Musical Track for Kitchen Ace, Best Gameplay Challenge and Achievement, Best Gameplay Discovery and Expression, Best Level Design, and Best Pixel 1993. So, to get things started, I figured that I would talk about Doom's interface. When you complete a level, the results screen shows the following: the percentage of enemies that you killed, the percentage of items you picked up, the percentage of secrets found, and the time to complete the level, and a par, which is a level completion time that is rather challenging to meet. Showing the percent of kills, items, and secrets encourages players to seek out all the nooks and crannies of the levels, which encourages exploration. The time to complete and par encourages players to beat the game as fast as possible to push their skills after they have discovered all the level secrets. According to Wikipedia, the development of a strong speedrunning community is considered to have originated with the 1993 computer game Doom. Displaying these time to complete and par statistics is a large part of what caused this speedrunning community to form.
Yeah, also the result screen, I feel like every time I saw it, I almost felt like discouraged because I felt like I did really bad. And so it really helps like replaying through the levels. Like I definitely did this for the first episode for sure, where I could see that my time was low or there's some secrets I missed, and I definitely wanted to replay that. And so I feel like there's a lot of replay value looking at that screen.
Oh yeah, definitely. I guess that's sort of the advantage of having Doom be coded in all of this hardcore, gritty goodness, is that like Doom can present you with like a 20% secrets found, rather than feeling like, oh, this game is mean, it sucks. You can be like, oh, this game is mean, it's awesome, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I can definitely see why those results screen can sometimes be a bit unfortunate, especially because some of those secrets are just hard to find. I mean, there's some of them where you have to like shoot a random wall in order to unlock it. I mean, I seriously doubt that most players would encounter that on their first few times, and when they did find it, it would probably just be by accident or because they looked up a guide or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely had to pull up a guide for some of them. Also, I hated the ones where they were like timed, but you didn't know what door it opened, so like you just run out of time before you find the open door.
Oh wow, I didn't even know that. That's crazy. I mean, for me, I'm like far from a completionist, so I pretty much just go through the game, find what secrets I can, and then move on. But for people who are trying to 100%, yeah, having things like a timed completion door would be pretty tough to deal with, I imagine. Speaking of trying to get to doors in a specified amount of time, one of the things that Doom does that helps make this possible is that the run button makes you go really, really fast. The run button doesn't take you to top speed right away, but instead it has a period of acceleration to it. This helps sell you on the idea that Doom Guy and his arsenal of weapons and armor are big and heavy. This also makes it possible to run in short bursts without interfering with your aim very much.
It also gives a nice pace to the game, where there are times that like you start out slow, but as you continue the fight, like it ramps up and it goes quicker and quicker, and your speed allows you to dodge more and more projectiles. So I really like that pace of the game.
Yeah, it's true. There's a massive difference between like your walking speed and your running speed. So like depending on whether you're running or walking, it's almost like two different modes of the game, where in one case you're like methodically trying to pick off enemies and position yourself right around corners perfectly, and then when you're running, it's just like everything's a blur and you're just trying to be dodging enemies and, you know, figuring out how to even keep your viewpoint straight and stuff. So yeah, I could definitely see why that lends the gameplay a bit more variety than your average shooter. Having a run button, which has a period of acceleration until you hit the top speed, also makes it more challenging for speedrunners to complete the levels in the minimum amount of time possible, since if your run speed is interrupted, it'll take you some additional time to get back up to your top speed again.
Yeah, and I've tried to speedrun some games, and I've definitely attempted to speedrun the first episode of this, and it's not irritating, but it definitely gets you in the mindset of what is my best way to maximize my speed, especially in like some of the more tricky parts where there's like a lot of enemies in one corner. And so you don't want to lose your momentum, but you also have to be careful of trying to take down the enemies without losing your speed. So it gives also like a nice challenge to the game as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I never got into speedrunning for Doom, but like it seems like it would be a lot of fun, especially because of the fact that like the modern speedrunning community, they have modes for just complete the level no matter what the conditions are, where you're probably just going to be like ignoring all the enemies and just somehow managing to scrape by while only getting shot like 50 times. And then there's also 100% completion speedrunning, where you try and get to the end while killing every enemy and getting every secret, and like balancing the speed and like massacring as quickly as possible is a different kind of challenge that seems like it would be pretty fun. I definitely could see why speedrunning community really gravitated around this game, because it kind of does have, and of course that doesn't even take into mind the different like pathways that you can take and the weird glitches and stuff. But This isn't a speedrunning video, so I can't get into the details of that. It's just, I imagine that if there is a video by what's his name, the guy who does the history of speedrunning videos, it would probably be pretty long and elaborate, I imagine. Next thing I want to bring up as far as interface goes is that the game automatically aims your bullets up or down in order to hit enemies that are above or below you, which looks a little awkward but is functionally smooth. This ease of aiming allows users to easily shoot enemies while moving in order to dodge attacks, which I found to be pretty nice. You can switch to an overhead map view with the press of a button, which shows your character on it. You can run around while the overhead map view is displayed, so that you don't need to be constantly switching between moving around and looking at the map. This overhead view allows you to run at maximum speed while backtracking without getting too disoriented overall. The overhead map also reveals itself as you explore, which allows you to easily see the areas that you haven't been to, which helps you to figure out where you need to go next. The map has indicators for buttons, unlocked doors, locked doors, and even color-coded doors, which indicate which keycard was needed to unlock them. Those are some nice quality of life changes that also help with navigating around.
Yeah, I didn't even know that this existed until I read the script, and so I really wish I knew this before, because that would have helped out a lot.
Oops.
Yeah.
Fair point.
The status bar at the bottom of the screen shows Doom Guy's face, which is excellent at conveying his attitude. He shows different emotions depending on how hurt or injured you are, so he grits his teeth angrily as he takes damage or fires continuously, showing his determination in the heat of the battle. Doom Guy sternly and suspiciously looks left to right when idle, showing his alert and focused demeanor when traversing dangerous levels. As Doom Guy takes more damage, his face gets bloodier, his hair gets disheveled, and his eyes gradually close. This emphasizes his perseverance in continued pain and injury. Doom Guy gets an evil grin on his face, which shows the joy he takes in inflicting violence on the demons of hell.
I want to address something that's a little bit of a mixed bag, where it's got some advantages and some disadvantages. The game has mouse and keyboard controls, which work well, but they have some quality of life issues. When you move the mouse forward and backward, it will move your character. But that means that when you're trying to aim your character by scooting the mouse left and right, you'll accidentally be moving your character in the process, which is a bit annoying. The arrow keys can be used to strafe left and right, but because this is from an era where that was not standard, you have to hold another button down in order to make left and right strafe instead of turn with tank controls. That being said, both of those issues can be fixed with modern game mods, so if you're not trying to be a retro enthusiast like us, that problem can be eliminated, all things considered. So I think that about wraps things up for interface. Next topic we wanted to talk about is the sound atmosphere. One thing that's cool about the sound atmosphere is that sound effects are used to identify enemies. All enemies have their own unique sound, which makes it possible to detect what you have to find around the corner simply by listening. This is especially great in the beginning, as new enemies get introduced by sound alone.
I really love how they did this, because I feel like I don't even see this in modern games today. And especially in a game where this fast-paced, I think it just really helps, even in the discovery area of trying to get to new areas. I got lost a bunch of times within this game, and being able to hear the different enemies throughout the map helped me navigate my way to where I need to go. So even in that area, I think it really helps the game out.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of funny how Doom's twisted way of directing you is like, oh, are you finding stuff that hasn't been killed yet? Well, and you're on the right track. And so by extension, it's like if you hear enemies in a particular area, it's like, oh, okay, well, I must be onto something, so go in that way. And so, yeah, I can imagine that the sound effects would be a useful direction indicator from that point of view. The demon noises emphasize their beastly nature and strength and help to inspire fear in the player. I particularly like the battle cry from the Baron when he sees you. If you open up a secret door and he's face to face with you, that woo right in your face is really something that makes you want to turn around and run the opposite direction. Sound effects are used to emphasize the impacts of battle. When you're hearing your own pain and dying sounds, it emphasizes how you're losing. But on the other hand, if you're hearing mostly demon pain and dying sounds, it emphasizes how you're winning. Next point I want to make is that sound effects are often used to make traps more scary. So oftentimes, enemies will be behind secret doors. You'll hear their idle sound effects, so you'll know they're around somewhere, but you won't know exactly where, which puts you on edge. Later on, you will trigger a condition and you will hear a secret door open, followed by the sounds of enemies attacking you.
There's a couple of moments in this game that are really golden, and how they almost scare you, where you you collect a key card and then all of a sudden a door comes out and the lights go out. And I love that so much, because it's it turns into a horror game, even though this is more like a shoot 'em up type game. And I think it's just really effective the way they're able to hide enemies.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that the fact that they put the spooks into an action game, I mean, having that contrast sort of helps both of them emphasize a little more and stuff like that. Because if they were just always scaring you nonstop, then you kind of have your guard up and you might, not be as scared when things do happen. But if you're just kind of slowly crawling around and thinking, okay, I gotta get the next key card and get on my way, and then all of a sudden, oh crap, now I'm all of a sudden being ambushed and I can't even see where I am at, and yada yada yada. So it's definitely some impressive direction from the guys who were making the game, and it's neat how they actually use the sound effects to make those trap spooks work even better, I would say. The shotgun firing sound is powerful, and the reload afterwards is satisfying. You can fire it on repeat, and it doesn't get old in my opinion. So that about wraps things up as far as sound atmosphere goes. Next point I want to cover is technical artistry. So just to provide some background for some of the points I'm going to talk about, a game engine is a set of software tools which provide various general functionality relating to how to make a game work, such as figuring out how to display objects, figuring out how to make sounds play, and so on. Programmers can use a game engine to take care of the general game-related functionality so that the programmers can focus on the things that are specific to their game, such as which sound to play, which objects to display, and so on. John Carmack created a new game engine for Doom. Some of the new features in this engine, which were not present in their previous engines, included floors and ceilings have now got adjustable heights, including elevators that can move you up and down. Walls can be positioned at different angles rather than always need to be 90 degrees. Lighting has adjustable brightness and can be adjusted for each room, including light flickering. There's also an effect called light diminishing, which causes further away objects to appear darker than closer objects, assuming that the lighting is consistent. There's also spatial audio, where further away sounds are quieter than closer sounds. And moving or non-moving pictures can be placed on walls, floors, and ceilings, which allows for things like liquid shimmering on toxic waste floors and crucified bodies twitching on the walls while they still cling to life. So, pretty nice additional features that help make their levels a lot more interesting overall, I would say.
100%. Doom runs fast and smooth, and one of the primary reasons for this is that Doom was basically the first game to use the technique known as binary space partitioning, which Don Kamrick learned about from a research paper. Well, technically John used less sophisticated binary space partitioning for his nth NES port of Wolfenstein 3D, but he used it on Doom. The technique allows for the software to quickly determine which graphical objects are closest to you. This allows the game to draw the closest objects to you and not spend any time drawing objects that are further from you if they are blocked from view by the closer objects. Corbett will link some of the videos in the description which will explain the concept more thoroughly. After Doom, many other games use this technique as well. The technique is present in the source game engine, which was used to make Half-Life 2, and the technique is present in Unreal Engine 3, which was used to make BioShock Infinite and Mass Effect.
Doom added a feature called Demos, which allowed users to easily record what happened in a gaming session and replay it later. A demo will record the states of all objects on the map at each given time. Doom can then replay a demo by generating images to match the state of the objects at each recorded time. Because demos only record the position and status of different objects, a demo takes much less space than a recording of a video of your play session. This allowed demos to be easily shared over the internet. The ease of recording and sharing these demos is another part of what allowed the speedrunning community for Doom to flourish. The next thing as far as technical achievement I want to highlight is that Doom was programmed in a way that made it easy to modify the game, which allowed for Doom to have a thriving modding community. John Carmack designed Doom so that parts of the game could be easily swapped out by users without breaking the rest of the game. He did this by putting parts of the game into separate .wad files, or WAD files. A WAD file may include the layout of a level, a graphic for a monster, or a music track that would play. If the user switches the .wad file out for one of their own creation, then Doom would just use the behavior of the new WAD file and not the old one. Some of the behavior in Doom could not be altered by switching out the WAD files, such as the timing and strength of weapons and enemies, but even with this limited WAD-based customization, according to some users on Doomworld, there are tens of thousands of Doom WAD customizations. However, do keep in mind that these numbers include WAD customizations for both Doom 1 and Doom 2. I couldn't really find a reliable way to just get Doom 1 WAD numbers. I'll link a citation to the forum post in the video description. The source code of a game contains all of the behavior of a software program, but it's organized in a way that is easy for a person to read and modify to their liking. 4 years after launch, John Carmack released the source code for Doom to the public for free as one of the early adopters of open source software licensing. This allowed users to remove all limits on customization and change anything about how Doom worked to their liking. This unleashed Doom mods even further, allowing for the creation of what are called total conversion mods, which essentially turn Doom into a completely different game. Some of the best ones include Sonic Roboblast 2, a 3D Sonic game, Castlevania Simon's Quest, a 3D Castlevania game, and Total Chaos, a 3D survival horror game. Finally, the last point I want to cover as far as technical artistry is concerned is that Doom was released with multiplayer functionality, which worked well thanks to effective programming. Each player would be running Doom on their own computer. If a player inputs an action on one computer, the computer would tell all the other computers that the action occurred, and the other computer would move that player's character accordingly. This method of synchronizing computers meant that very little information needed to be exchanged between computers in order to keep them synchronized with each other. You just needed to know what the other players were doing, and then you could move on to the next frame of action. This method of synchronizing could easily keep up with the speed that Doom was played at, even across 4 different computers. Doom's efficient programming meant that many PCs could run Doom at over 35 frames per second. However, Doom would limit the frame rate for every player to only 35 frames per second. As a result, if multiple computers were connected to each other, as long as every computer could run Doom at a minimum of 35 frames per second, each player would be competing on an even playing field. Next category I'd like to cover is Best Music Track for Kitchen Ace and Taking Names. This
Great
nomination,
name, by the way.
Yeah, I didn't actually catch on to the kicking ass. Just saying, Kitchen Ace is a weird way of saying it. I wonder if it's like one of their developers just had a weird way of speaking, so they wanted to make fun of it or something. But either way, though, it definitely has a very nice ring to it as far as something that sticks in your brain and stuff. So this particular music track nomination is from Mitch, but we'll be sort of covering his points here since he's not joining us today. The music as a whole is very good, but the original MIDI quality leaves something to be desired. Since music track is less restrictive for iterations, we were able to highlight the 3DO version of the game, which demonstrates the energy and vibe of the game's soundtrack excellently. As for Kitchen Ace itself, the track has the usual hallmarks of good, energetic tempo, build, and crescendo, but it also equally works as an earworm beat.
Yeah, it has a great blend of a solid beat plus escalating excitement. In other words, equal parts ambient mood as much as its bombastic execution of the tone Doom creates. It's not straight horror, nor is it a heroic adventure, but somewhere in between. And in that between space, you catch on to the kind of reduced importance Doom has on the story in favor of hell-slaying vibes.
In general, Kitchen Ace is Mitch's favorite track, and the track that got him into the score as a whole, which is partly the definition of the category. A track that speaks of the game or the game's intended thesis in such a way as to bring people into that experience or to create a deeper understanding of that experience.
Yeah, I think this is like the only song throughout, or music track throughout the whole of 93 and 92 that I listen to on my own. Like, I've been playing this in the car as I go drive places, and it really just like in the name, it's Kitchen Ace, like you're kicking ass,
Yeah, have you listened to the rest of the 3DO soundtrack or just this song?
I've listened to a lot of other ones. I think actually my favorite is the where you're looking at your stats of the mission, the level.
Oh yeah,
I
that
really
one's
like
nice.
that one.
Mm-hmm. I'd say that for me, my personal favorite from the 3DO soundtrack would be the what is it? The Imps song. That one, like, sounds so creepy,
yeah.
but so catchy at the same time. And, like, I love it in the original, but the 3DO one is just next level. That being said, though, at the end of the day, as much as I like it, I didn't vote for it, whereas Mitch voted for his. So, credit where credit's due. We got to spotlight his song first and foremost, I would say, which it's a good song. So I can understand where he's coming from. Next category I'd like to spotlight for Doom is Best Gameplay Challenge and Achievement. So, the first point on my list is that pretty much all enemies in the game have avoidable attacks, such that you will take no damage if you are good. You have Pinky Demons, which you can avoid by backing up when they bite you, Lost Souls, which you can avoid by moving to the side when they charge you, Imps, Cacodemons, Cyber Demons, and Barons, which have projectiles that can be dodged by moving to the side when the projectiles are coming at you, Zombie Soldiers, who have hit scan weapons but low health, such that you can usually kill them before they kill you, and finally, the Spider Mastermind, which has some delay before its gun starts firing at you, which gives you a chance to get behind cover. Having this avoidability of damage is good for challenge and achievement because it puts the player in complete control of their fate. If you are repeatedly dying to an encounter, you can just keep getting better at avoiding damage, and eventually, you should be able to emerge victorious. Also, as a result of making damage completely avoidable, if the player does take damage, it's quick and immediate feedback to let them know they did something wrong, and let them learn from their mistake. Putting the player in control of their success also means that the player can use their victories to feel proud of their skill, instead of attributing it to luck and other factors.
Yeah, I think this game has the best learning curve out of all the other games for these 2 years. Because, like, when you look at Contra 3, like, the best way to clear through the level is just kind of bashing your head against the wall as you try to get into the mood and trying to get good. But in Doom, you have multiple ways to take out the scenarios by trying out different strategies. And even, like, the way the enemies are set up is that you usually have a different experience each time you play through it, because they're all intermixed and you have to find a way to move around them. And also, I think the way they use the power-ups and the weapons throughout the levels kind of gives you a learning curve and also a way to take on different strategies if you're struggling on a certain area.
Yeah, all very good points. We're going to cover them a little more in detail later on when we talk about the difficulty settings, but yes, I would agree that Doom's level curve is very nice and very smooth overall. So, good point that you added on there. So, the next point that I would bring up is that the game often throws groups of enemies at you, which make the battles feel more tactical and challenging. You'll notice in my previous point that the methods for avoiding damage vary depending on the enemy. What happens when you have a group of enemies attacking you at once? You'll need to figure out which enemies are the biggest source of damage or easiest to kill, and focus on killing them first, and you'll need to figure out which one is going to damage you most immediately and prioritize dodging it first and foremost. Normally, in games like this, you would just circle strafe to avoid damage, but in general that becomes much less viable when there are many different enemies that would deal damage, and as a result you need to get more creative with dodging.
You also need to quickly figure out the enemy count as well as the enemy types, and use that to determine which weapon would be best for dealing with the overall group. Choosing the best weapon for a battle is a tactical choice, depending on circumstances and ammo availability. You start the level off with a pistol, and you acquire weapons and ammo as you traverse through the levels and get secrets. Generally speaking, guns that are more powerful will be more rare to obtain and have more rare ammo pickups, so you want to save the most powerful weapons for the tough challenges.
Yep, agree with those points wholeheartedly. Next thing we have as far as challenge and achievement is that the game has 5 different difficulties, so that each player can feel a satisfying challenge for their skill level. The flavorful names also convey the kind of challenge you will be experiencing. In order from easiest to hardest, you have I'm Too Young to Die, Hey Not Too Rough, Hurt Me Plenty, Ultra Violence, and Nightmare. Mitch and I found Hurt Me Plenty, the middle difficulty for Doom, to be a satisfyingly difficult challenge, which may be a sign that they targeted their difficulty levels well. Different difficulties change the number and placement of enemies, but the enemies still take the same number of hits to kill, and mostly deal the same amount of damage. This makes it so that the skill and muscle memory that you develop from lower difficulties will still apply at higher difficulties.
Doom spaces out enemy encounters with the less stressful challenge of finding secrets and the level exit. When you kill enemies, they stay dead, meaning that you are able to backtrack through the level without worrying about enemies attacking you. Now, this doesn't apply on Nightmare difficulties, but most players won't be playing Doom on Nightmare difficulty anyways. This allows players to focus on figuring out where to go next using the map and surrounding as clues. The maps are often laid out in a maze-like fashion, featuring locked doors, keys, switches, and teleporters. This adds a nice pace to the game where there is a fast-paced combat which slowly becomes an exploration game as fewer enemies are in the game, so you get a breath of air to navigate through the maze. As a result, merely finding the exit is still somewhat challenging, though the previously mentioned overhead map makes this not too difficult overall. Secrets have varying levels of challenge, but some being easy to find and others being quite hard to find. However, secrets are optional, so the player can partake in as much or as little as a challenge as they see fit. Adding more relaxed navigation breaks between the battles, allowing the battles to have more impact and challenge when they come up. The player will feel the jump in the challenge when they switch from the more relaxed exploring environment to the tense battle environment.
So those are the challenge pros that are strictly good, where we had nothing but good things to say about them. But we also had some things that are kind of a mixed bag as far as some benefits and some cons. So the first of those is that players can save and load at any time they want. On the plus side, players can use this feature to reduce the lost time that occurs when they die, which can reduce player frustration. On the minus side, players can abuse this too much. If the game reduces the consequences of failure too much, it may reduce the satisfaction they have when they achieve their victory. This problem is partially mitigated because saving requires a small degree of memory and effort. Players may be too forgetful or too lazy to save often, so there might still be decent consequences when they die.
Yeah, that's definitely occurred to me a couple times. I remember in the first episode, I had to fight the final fight with a pistol until I got a rocket launcher, and that was definitely rough. I wish I saved beforehand.
Yeah, totally. And the problem is mostly mitigated because saving mid-level is optional. If you don't like it, you just don't do it. Personally, I liked saving only when you're done with your gaming session, such that I had plenty of times where I died and started the level over with a pistol. That being said, I confess that I did save and load a couple of times when I was like 2/3 through the level and on like 7% health, and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do this whole thing over again. So, even I am not a purist in that regard.
Yeah, I definitely did that a couple times as well.
And the second thing that's sort of a mixed bag is that Doom had competitive multiplayer at the time of its release, and was the game to create the term deathmatch. I have heard that it provided a fun and satisfying challenge at the time of its release. However, Doom has inspired countless other multiplayer competitive first-person shooter games, which added on many other multiplayer features. As a result, Doom's multiplayer is pretty outclassed by the competitive first-person shooters of subsequent years and today. And then the last thing that we want to bring up, which is more of a con, is that Doom has only 7 non-boss enemies, which lowers the variety of challenge experienced by the player. Doom does still use the environment and different enemy grouping to keep the enemy encounters feeling reasonably fresh throughout the game. Nevertheless, by the end of the game, I was starting to feel a little tired of the existing non-boss enemy types, personally.
Hello, sorry to interrupt here, but there was a counterpoint I wanted to mention which I could have sworn I had written for the Doom script, but I must be mistaken. Normally I wouldn't interject myself in the editing lab, but seeing as how I have a con for level design in here, I thought it only fair I chime in with an important pro. So there's a paper called The Magical Number 7, Plus or Minus 2, by American psychologist George A. Miller. This is a fairly famous paper, and I recall some time ago hearing someone argue that Doom's enemy count, intentionally or otherwise, adheres to a fundamental principle Miller is noted for coining. That being that the human mind can only keep up to 7 important chunks of information in their head at once, specifically with regards to short-term memory. And to my knowledge, it specifically accounts for distinctive sounds and images from a distance. Put another way, if I were to spill out a mirage of board game pieces on a table in front of you, have you see them for maybe a minute or two, and then put them away, you'd be able to remember clearly and with detail about 7 of them. Now, keep in mind I wasn't able to retrieve the original paper or the original video that drew this connection, and the paper itself has been challenged, with more recent information giving stronger indications that we can only keep around 4 items in play at once. But you could also argue at least 2 of the enemies are reskins, that being the shotgun-wielding zombie and the invisible pinkies. Same enemies, different tactics. That would bring the total closer to 5. Our sense here at the Academy is that the current scientific estimates suggest that it's valid to say the average human working memory can only hold between 3 to 8 items in mind at once. But really, what this all means is that enemy encounters are meant to be a juggling match of player prioritization. To properly create a Doom gameplay experience, you need a smoothie of enemies that the player can quickly remember their preferred tactic of dealing with, and then you surprise them with varied level design and enemy combinations. So yes, what the mini chairman says is true, there is a lack of enemy variety, which does become more apparent the longer you play. However, it is also true that this creates a more competitive-focused landscape between the player and the game. People who enjoy beat-em-ups are much less bothered by seeing repeated enemies. What they like is the way the enemies are remixed and redistributed in seemingly endless ways throughout the game. I think what the mini chairman is talking about has to do with immersion, world building, and a sense of surprise and excitement, and all of that gets diminishing returns at some point. But what you get instead is a gameplay loop that is endlessly enjoyable and has clearly stood the test of time.
Our next category is Best Gameplay, Discovery, and Expression. Doom has a very high density of secrets. There are an average of 4.6 major secrets per level, which are counted by the game at the results screen, and there are additional minor secrets that aren't even counted by the game at the results screen. This high density of secrets means that you are frequently rewarded with validation of your explorer instincts as you are searching around for secrets, which I found very nice. Doom has many different rewards from secrets, and they almost always feel useful. You have keycards, which are used to unlock doors, health pickups, armor, which reduces incoming damage, 6 obtainable weapons, 4 ammo types, and 8 power-ups, which provide Doomguy with temporary or permanent upgrades. Other than the 1% health and armor upgrades, every other item that can be picked up is a significant benefit for the player. And the finely tuned difficulty of Doom means that you will be feeling in dire need of the pickups when you finally get to them. I really like how Doom has those 1% health and armor bonuses lying throughout the levels, because they help guide the player to areas of interest, and they give them small rewards as they go through the levels. It's sort of akin to like coins in Mario, but like you'd never see like a Mario coin in a first-person shooter, you know, so it's kind of nice having that small reward scattered everywhere in Doom.
It's also kind of cool where you could try to maximize like your health and armor, where you try to heal yourself up to 100 and then start using the 1% to...
Yeah, that's right. The 1% health and armor bonuses can take you above 100%, so they're always useful for you, even if you're at full health, which I found nice, as did Noah.
Doom has 3 secret levels, 1 per episode. Unlocking a secret level requires finding an alternate exit, which is usually hidden behind some of the most challenging secrets. The secret levels often have a more gimmicky design, where the creators get to test out level concepts that push unusual level structures, which may have been less immersive or too difficult for traditional Doom levels.
The next feature in favor of discovery and expression is that there's a lot of quality of life features that make it easy to backtrack and hunt for secrets. There's the very fast run speed, which I mentioned earlier, the overhead map, which lets you see where you've been and where you need to explore. There's also secret doors often having hints that indicate they are secret doors, and as a result, you don't usually need to use brute force to find them. If you do want to use brute force, however, I also appreciate that you can just mash the open door button while running along a wall, and it allows you to check for secret doors pretty quickly and efficiently.
The atmosphere of the game makes the exploration more immersive and rewarding. The last third of the game is exploring hell itself, where you get to experience evil incarnate, as the levels are decorated with twitching bodies and living architecture made of flesh and bone. This gives your exploration a feeling of struggling to find the tools to survive as a solitary human in an oppressively evil world that is not meant to sustain you.
That being said, while we do have many pros in favor of the exploration, one con I would mention is that Doom having only 7 non-boss enemies in the game tends to reduce the sense of exploration you get from discovering new enemy types. At least for me personally. You know, I really like it when a game like Castlevania just non-stop barrages you with new enemies, so having only 7 makes there less times where you'll just come around a corner and find something new and you'll feel like, oh man, I'm so cool for finding this new enemy, you know? But that might just be more of a me thing.
No, I totally get that. It's always cool when you experience new stuff, especially later in the game, because like, for instance, in episode 2 and 3, I feel like it gets a little more dull with the enemy count, because instead they'll just add like a couple of the boss enemies from the first episode. But I mean, overall, the enemies are still really fun to fight.
Yep, for sure. The next category we'd like to discuss is best level design. So, to start things off, when you start Doom's level with a pistol, the game employs resource management and gradual power escalation to give the players a consistent sense of challenge and achievement. In my experience, ammo resources usually felt scarce, even while discovering a fair number of secrets. I was able to avoid using my fists for the most part, but it felt like I was only accomplishing this by being careful at hitting most of my shots and using my shotgun shells up at close range. The limited ammo also meant that I usually had to use a variety of guns and couldn't just stick to my favorite ones. Health resources also felt scarce. Most of the time, I felt significant relief when I found a health pickup. And over the course of the level, each gun and upgrade that you get feels like a large improvement in your arsenal, which you'll need to employ if you want to survive. And I know this point does have a lot of overlap with challenge and achievement, but it's a specific kind of challenge achievement that's really only made possible by how they laid out the levels so that they're just drip feeding you the precise amount of health that you need. So I figured that it was a better pick for best level design personally. When you end one of Doom's levels with a full arsenal, you get to carry it over to the next level, which leads to an increased feeling of empowerment and loss. The early enemies of a level are designed to be able to be handled with only a pistol and limited ammo. So when you come in there with your full arsenal of weapons, you're able to usually dispatch them with ease, and it lets you feel powerful. However, your lack of knowledge on the new level will usually cause you to still die eventually, despite this increased power level. As a result, making yourself powerful and somewhat breaking the level design is only temporary, assuming users don't constantly save their game. Doom's level design often sets up pranking moments. The game indicates to the player that they will get a good thing, and when the player goes to get that good thing, instead they get a bad thing, and at this point, the player can feel the game developers laughing at them on the other side of the screen. Oftentimes, the bad thing that you encounter can still be overcome with skill, and if you end up dying because of it, you can easily avoid the trap when you go through the level again. The troll moments are even used by the story, with the end of episode 1 seeming to kill the player, and the end of episode 3 revealing that their trip back to Earth may not be the salvation they hoped for. Overall, I like the troll moments in Doom. Giving the player moments like these helps to ensure that they die more often, which allows them to experience the part of the level design that's built around starting with a pistol. It also adds to the sense of accomplishment, since a part of you feels like you're fighting the developers themselves. You're also usually able to laugh at the moment and find it entertaining, particularly after you beat the level and you can look at it in retrospect. And in general, it demonstrates a strong and rebellious attitude from the developers.
Doom's level design combines several game elements to evoke different emotion and moods. Doom combines upbeat rocking tunes with powerful guns and righteous violence against evil forces to get the player to feel awesome. Doom combines choral-tinged music with red skyboxes, corpse hung from walls, and large waves of demons to get the player feel oppressed and fight against hopelessness. But most notably, Doom tries to scare the player. Music that is often tinged with spooky, droning electronic ambience. Diminishing lighting, which gets darker in the distance, such that you can't fully discern far away enemies. Flickering lighting, which is very dark most of the time, interspersed with moments of light which let you suddenly see the threatening monsters. Semi-invisible enemies which are hard to see with full lighting and even harder to see in dim lighting. Enemies that emit groans periodically when idle, which can be heard even from long distance to let the player know he is not safe. Doors that lock or unlock after you pass them, such as you are trapped in areas with enemies. To quote Gabe Newell, the founder of Steam, "I remember playing Doom till 3 o'clock in the morning. It was the first time I had ever been frightened while I was using a computer. And it really opened my eyes. Experiences like that are why we play computer games."
Doom also uses a somewhat non-linear level design. You may have a couple of different paths to get to the exit, or you might need to visit multiple locations before exiting the level, but the order you visit those locations is up to the player. When you die and retry the level, you can try a different path, which adds variety, and if you die a few times, you can figure out which is the best path to take, which adds strategy.
Yeah, I think the level design itself enhances the gameplay and the combat with its intricate designs. I think if the level design wasn't as good as it was, then the gameplay itself would feel a lot more boring. Because, like, there's moments where you kind of feel claustrophobic in mazes and you kind of panic. And I think if you took that away and it was more just like there'd be a lot less tension when fighting enemies. Another game that does great with this is like Call of Duty Zombies, where if it was just shooting zombies mindlessly, then it would be a lot less dull. But it's within the level design where you kind of feel trapped, where, you know, you get really nervous, and usually that pushes the player to really use everything they can to their disposal.
Yeah, totally. I think that's one of the things that really makes Doom noteworthy is the fact that not only were they advancing a lot of the technology around making first-person shooters fast and user-friendly, but it wasn't just a tech demo like, say Pilot Wings for the SNES. More than just showing a proof of concept of the technology, they also were really utilizing it in ways that were smart and really helped you get more out of that experience, using things like the, panicky claustrophobic stuff, but also being able to be put in a situation where you can't just cheese the enemies and stuff. Well, those are the things we have in favor of level design. Mitch had a few problems with it, which I'll list here so that he has his voice mentioned in the video. He says, the meat and potatoes design can get a little frustrating at times. Troll ambushes did overstay their welcome, especially when it happens in nearly every level and sometimes on multiple occasions. For whatever reason, it doesn't feel as organic here as it does in Doom 2016. My guess is that this one has more of a horror emphasis, so relying on the same trick to create tension via fear is different than you knowing each room is an arena and willingly going into it. Sometimes I clear a location only to find a lone enemy I somehow missed start shooting at me in the back while I'm trying to shoot into a new room. This happened way too often for a player such as myself, who's generally very thorough. And finally, figuring out how to progress can sometimes be unnecessarily annoying. The visuals don't lend themselves to clearly distinct rooms or areas, and sometimes the developers don't do quite enough to help the player out. However, this is secretly a strength, because it means the game is more enjoyable to revisit. If you haven't played the game in a long time, you're more likely to forget the steps needed to advance. And since level design can't really be altered by adjusting difficulty modes, it becomes worthwhile to replay.
And I think we can look at all his points as he just had a skill issue.
We don't consider any players to be worse than others, even if they are less skilled. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. I mean, Mitch is a perfectly capable gamer. I mean, he's the one who ended up beating Contra 3. I gave up after like the 4th boss level. So
that is true. Yep.
Yeah. So he definitely has some skills and whatnot. It's just different things are different kinds of players, but that's why we try and have a panel of different judges so that, we can maybe by all of our heads being put together, give the audience an impression of what their experience might be like.
No, 100%. I just had to throw a shot at.
Yep, for sure. So those were the cons mentioned by Mitch, which weren't as much a problem for me, but I can see why they were a problem for him. But I did have one con I wanted to voice myself, which is that Episode 1 ends by making it seem like you died and mentioning that you're on the shores of hell, but then you start Episode 2 and you find yourself in more industrial buildings. Only by reading the manual do you find out that you were instead knocked unconscious by the enemies, but not killed for some reason, and ended up in the Deimos moonbase alive and at full health. And the shores of hell expression used is not literal, but instead referring to the fact that the Deimos moonbase is adjacent to hell. I personally find this to not be good storytelling, but beyond that, I think it rather hurts player cohesion and immersion due to mismatches between where the player thinks they should be and where they actually are. But, Doom's not getting any points for narrative, so there's that. It's just that, it also kind of hurts the level design a little bit because, it sort of removes you from the experience where you're like, wait a minute, what? This isn't hell.
No, I definitely understand that.
So that wraps up all of our individual categories besides Best Pixel. To give an overview on how Doom measures up for the categories it was not nominated for, I would say that Doom is very good at fellowship and relaxation because of its innovative multiplayer, good at art direction, if somewhat drab for the first 2/3 of the game, good original score, though the MIDI execution leaves something to be desired, good direction, and not remarkable for the theatrical categories. So, to summarize our arguments for Doom and to give my Best Pixel pitch, Doom's technical achievement is plain to see, with smooth and fast 3D graphics that outperformed all of the games from its year and even several games from later years. However, my personal biases tend to not care as much about how good the game was for the time, and instead focus more on how well the game holds up by modern day standards. And even from a modern day lens, this game with 30-year-old software still left a strong impression on me for a variety of reasons. For one thing, I would say that Doom left a stronger impression on me for how it used its technical innovation, more so than the technical innovation itself. The incredibly fast movement and ease of aiming made for an FPS experience that was much more focused on movement than I was used to, which gave it more of a power fantasy feel. The map, which was filled in as you explore, and the addition of height, allowed for satisfying and convenient exploration and secret hunting. And the use of animated textures on walls and floors, as well as the strategic use of lighting and darkness, helped the game to create a tense, ominous, and gritty atmosphere. Speaking of atmosphere, I also found the atmosphere of the game to be a large appeal. The game combines imagery from fantasy, science fiction, and hell to create an atmosphere that's akin to playing a heavy metal album cover. And the soundtrack has both upbeat rock music, as well as ominous ambient tracks to add variety to the blend of atmospheres. Doom's unique idea of fun is also generally a major selling point. You wouldn't normally think that a game that trolls you, spooks you, presents a dour atmosphere, and feels very difficult would be a game that is particularly fun. And yet, Doom very much is. All of these obstacles thrown in your way just serve to make it an even more satisfying power fantasy when you do overcome these obstacles. And most of these obstacles manage to do the job of feeling difficult without actually being too difficult to overcome, which is tricky to achieve. Doom was also extremely influential. To quote Wikipedia, historians such as Tristan Donovan in Replay the History of Video Games have termed it as causing a paradigm shift, promoting the rise in popularity of 3D games, first-person shooters, licensed technology between developers, and support for game modifications. It helped spark the rise of both online multiplayer games and player-driven content generation, and popularize the business model of online distribution. That's it for the Wikipedia quote. Doom also created the first strong speedrunning community, and in the years after Doom's release, all similar games were referred to as Doom clones, with the term first-person shooter only arising years later. For these reasons, in 2004, PC Gamer declared Doom to be the most influential game of all time. If you would like to play Doom yourself, you have several options available to you. If you want a version that is most faithful to the original, you would probably play on PC. You can buy Doom on GOG or Steam to compensate the authors, or play the legally free Chocolate Doom, which derives from the free version of Doom that was released to the public. If you're more of a console gamer, you can buy Doom for modern consoles and phones. These versions add some quality of life features, such as controller support and a crosshair in the center of your screen, which lights up when an enemy is in the crosshairs. And if you want even more visual improvements and other features, I have heard people recommend GZ Doom for PC. Anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap things up, Noah?
No, I think that's about it.
Sounds good. So, if Doom wins Best Pixel, it will showcase the power of a game to massively advance a genre when technical advancements are paired with a dedication to hardcore fun.